Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast presented by Gold Boys. Coming up on the show, Adam Kaufman of The Gambler, Boston Radio will join us. We'll talk about the Celtics as they are headed to the finals and just a very strange dynamic here with Boston with all the teams they face, but they have won 12 out of 14 in the playoffs. So we'll talk to Adam about that. Maybe get his thoughts on the Patriots, some NFL, some other things. I don't know, Red Sox. He bets all the sports. So excited to talk to Adam. Excited to have Adam on for the first time here on this podcast. But I do have a baseball bet I like, a future that I just think is completely mispriced. But before we get to that, I do want to start here with Boston. And as we're taping this, Game 4 between Minnesota and Dallas is taking place. I'm not going to just stay up here and wait to see who wins this game. I assume Dallas wins this series. Probably not going to talk about this just because, hey, by the time you're listening to this, we're going to know either Dallas advanced or 3-1. And if it's 3-1, we will spend some time on Game 5 and see if we can get some juice back into this series. Otherwise, probably going to be Dallas, Boston here at some point. In Boston, it's a very confusing run because if you make the point, hey, they haven't played anybody. All these teams, first of all these teams weren't good to begin with. I remember talking before the playoffs. They have such an easy path to the postseason because the East isn't any good. That was before all these guys got hurt. The path was easy. They were minus money before all these guys started getting hurt just because I think the first tipping point was Giannis got hurt at the end of the regular season. Oh, the competition here really isn't there. Where does Philly scare you? Do the Knicks scare you? The Bucks are a mess. Now Giannis is hurt. And then it only got softer where you draw Miami. Oh, this is a tough matchup. Maybe their toughest matchup that we'll have in the playoffs. Butler goes down along with Jaquez and Rozier, who was hurt. And then just go down the line. The Cavs were an easy draw and lose Mitchell, and they were missing guys. And then the Pacers was an easy draw and no Halliburton. So really, it's hard because if you just say, "Hey, I don't respect them. They haven't beaten anybody." Well, that's not, you can say, "Hey, that's not fair. They're 12-2. What can you do besides go 12-2 against the East?" And they're held to too high of a standard. And I think there's some truth to that. But if you ask me, hey, do you trust them? I don't trust them. I just think there's too many moments where they take the foot off the gas and there's not the intensity defensively. I think they really miss Porzingis defensively, and you expect him back here for the finals with the long layoff. And June 6th is game 1, and then after game 1 on June 6th, you have a 2-day layoff, and game 2 is that Sunday. So it's Thursday, June 6th for game 1, and then Sunday, I guess it's June 9th for game 2. So we're looking at a long time here without very much basketball, which will be good for Porzingis to get back on track. But again, it's very confusing in terms of how to handle Boston, how much respect you pay to the season that they've had, this postseason run they've had. And I guess for all the questions about them, all the holding them to higher standards and not really believing them, that's 4 wins away. If they win 4, I think that stuff all goes away because nobody kind of believed in Denver that much until they won it. Until you do it, it's hard for people to believe. But once you do it, you do earn that benefit of the doubt. So it'll be weird where if Tatum and Brown do win, all those questions just kind of go away, and Tatum is anointed as one of the stars of the league. I don't think he's one of the top 5 players, but I guess he's safely in the top 10. You always get that little bump if you win a championship. So a lot at stake. It's just interesting from like an evaluation standpoint, a content standpoint, of just what to do with Boston because you can't just completely discount them. And I do feel like people are a little dismissive of them. At the same time, this path has been a complete joke, and you can't give them too much credit here. And they didn't even cover 3 out of the 4 against Indiana. They could have easily lost 3 out of the 4 games, but they didn't. So it's a back and forth between yeah, but and yeah, actually, and they're not beating it. They're not beating anybody. Well, who do you want them to play? Who do you want them to beat? They're only beating who's in front of them. It's a push and pull that's really hard to figure out and really hard to get a good balance of what this Celtics team is. We'll have a better sense obviously in a couple of weeks or in a week or so when they start to play the finals against the Western team. And I do think they might be in for a rude awakening, at least early, in terms of, hey, this is a different speed, a different caliber of opponent. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. Just quickly before I get to Adam, there is one baseball bet I like. The Phillies at DraftKings are minus 150 to win the division. Last time we talked was Monday, and I had just done the show right before the news came out that Acuna is out for the season. Now, he wasn't playing great anyway, but it's still Acuna. Riley's banged up. Strider's out for the season. Their pitching isn't great. And the one guy who's throwing the ball well for them, Sale, in the mix for a Cy Young here. Look, if you're going based on track record, it's only a matter of time before Sale's going for an MRI. His shoulders bother him, his elbows bother him. Something's going to happen. Now, if it doesn't happen, hey, I'll be wrong, but that's that's been the back of the baseball card the last 6-7 years. He misses a lot of time every single season. So if you're counting on him to be one of your aces, you're one Sale injury away from, hey, not only are we not a factor in this division, I don't know. Like, I don't know who take their place in the playoffs, but it's not outlandish to say, hey, if Sale got hurt, this thing could fall apart and they could be looking at And I don't know. I mean, with 6 teams in the playoffs, could somebody really steal their playoff spot? They are 15-1 to miss the playoffs. I don't think that's worth. I don't think that's a terrible, like, just a pizza bet or whatever. But to me, Philly's going to win the division. Wheeler, Suarez, all the pitching, the lineup. Um, they'll add guys at the deadline. Dabrowski's aggressive. I think this is one where it's minus 150. Hey, you could have gotten plus money before the season. You missed the best price. Okay, but this is going to be minus 250 in a couple of weeks, and maybe minus 350 in 6 weeks. Things like that. I think this is absolutely Philly's division to win here, and they're up 6 games right now. I think that lead will only expand. And I know the Braves. Hey, if you got them in the playoffs, it's funny. If you got them in the playoffs, they got knocked off as favorites against Philly the past couple of years. This is going to be a scenario where they only win like 87 games. They don't win the division, but you line up in game 1 and 2 of the playoffs, and you throw Sale and Fried, and then Morton. Austin Riley gets back healthy. They can actually upset people, and who knows, maybe they can make a run in the playoffs. But over 162, Philly with the lead, Philly with the health status. Philly, I think, is in good shape, and I think is a good bet to win that division. So Phillies to win the division is a bet I like. But coming up next, we'll talk some Celtics, little Patriots, maybe getting a little of everything with Adam Kaufman for Boston Radio, the Gambler. That is next. This is a Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More podcast. You can hear him on The Gambler with Adam Kaufman, WRKO 680 in Boston. I think I said that right. I've heard it enough. And he joins us now. It is Adam Kaufman. Adam, what's up, man? Thanks for coming on.
I was going to say we can hear you on The Gambler quite a bit during the football season, especially. So it's always nice to reconnect with you, my friend. You're busy. You're all over the place.
I am busy, but it's. I think we're going to get too much downtime here, and we're recording this before Game 4 of Dallas, Minnesota. But either way, we're looking at a long layoff, at least for the Celtics, who advance to the finals. It's funny, 12-2 in the playoffs, and the fact that they're 12-2 in the playoffs, and I can even ask you this question, is crazy. But are you more or less confident in their hopes of winning a championship now, as opposed to where you were before the playoffs started? 6 weeks ago or so.
Well, I think you have to be more confident just by virtue of the fact that they're here. They're in the NBA Finals. I mean, there were a loud, I don't know if it was a loud minority on social media or, that vocal minority, or if it was just everyone really that felt this way. But for a lot of people who are, and you know how Boston fans are, for a lot of people, they were just kind of unable to even enjoy the ride, enjoy the process. It's sort of the mentality of Patriots fans when Brady was around. It's like, wake me when we get to the playoffs. That's when stuff actually matters, stuff actually counts. The regular season's irrelevant, all of that stuff, and how obviously as Pats fans we long for those days. With the Celtics, it was, sort of similar. It was, this team has, been in the conference finals, 5 out of 7 years, 6 out of 8 years. I mean, they are regularly in the Final Four. They were in the championship round 2 years ago against the Warriors, sort of fumbled away an opportunity, and then last year came up short in that Game 7 against Miami in the East Finals. So now, throughout this season, the general mentality has basically been finals or bust. At least just getting there, finals or bust. Anything less than an appearance in the championship round would be considered a disaster, a failure of a season. And then, now that we're here and you look at the road that it has taken, you go against a Heat team that didn't have Butler, a Cavaliers team that basically didn't have Mitchell, and then, more recently, obviously, a Pacers team that was missing Halliburton for half that series. And, some want to look at it and say it's been a cakewalk, and hey, you avoided Giannis or Embiid or all of these other guys, the toughest players on the teams that you did face. But I look at it and say, one, you play the cards you're dealt, so whatever it is. But now you're in a finals situation with Kristaps Porzingis coming back from his injury and likely, as we know, against the Dallas Mavericks. And had it been the Denver Nuggets, because maybe I just think that much of Denver and Jokic and MVP and defending champs and all of that. Had it been Denver, I could have looked at it and said, this series is kind of a pick'em. I don't know what the odds would have looked like, but in my head, it would have been, the series is kind of a pick'em. And I could rationalize things going sour and Boston losing. And so, it's very nuanced in terms of how we classify this season. But as soon as it wasn't Denver, if it was literally anyone else, and we expect it to be Dallas, as you said, then short of winning a championship, it's a failure. It's a failure of a season. You have to win against the Mavericks, or if you get some historic comeback that literally has never happened in the NBA by the Timberwolves, then, sure, them too. You have to win this series. But in terms of the whole, do you feel better? I think that there were a lot of people, and should be a lot of people, and I am one of them, encouraged by what we saw against the Pacers. That was as competitive a sweep as you could possibly have. It was a series that, right now we could easily be talking, you and I, about the Celtics being down 3-1 in this series. So, it speaks to how well they closed these games, and the questions that lingered throughout the year as, to what caliber of a clutch team they were going to be, and how would they fare in those minutes tight late in games versus past years where they've, you know, blown it, quite frankly. And so I think, yes, the Pacers are not the second best team in the NBA or even in the Eastern Conference, but they're pesky. They put up a fight. They didn't roll over against the Knicks, certainly, when a lot of people, including me, thought that New York was going to win that series. They didn't roll over in game 4 when they could have just packed up for Cancun or whatever else they were going to do. They were in it trying to win it, and I appreciate the way the Celtics came out of it.
Yeah, I would just worry, like, looking forward, handicapping the finals. I would just worry there's a little bit of a factor that Boston could be in for a rude awakening, just because you're going to have such a jump from who you were playing to what you are looking ahead to. And the look ahead line was Boston minus 280 just a couple days ago. I thought that was way too high. It is, where looking at it now, it's Boston minus 225, Dallas plus 180. If that's the finals, who would you pick and how many games? I'll ask it that way.
So I would pick Boston, but I don't think it's going to be easy, and I didn't think Indiana was going to be easy. I'm really surprised that was a sweep. I figured 5 or 6, and that's kind of how I look at this series against the Mavericks, presuming it happens. I figure, it's going to be 5 or 6. I know people could look at 5, say gentleman sweep, that was easy, but it depends how the games go, right? So I fully expect Dallas, even though Boston is, as you said, 12-2 in the playoffs and perfect on the road so far. I think the Mavericks are going to find a way to steal a couple of games or outright win them. And I still don't think we're going 7, though. I just, one thing that I'm sure you probably feel the same way. It has surprised me. One, I'm surprised that Dallas is up 3-0 on Minnesota to begin with. I thought that what the Timberwolves did to the Nuggets defensively was going to be an undoing for the Mavericks as well. And I thought that Anthony Edwards was going to wake up. That really hasn't happened. But defensively in particular, I thought they were going to have a way to, not eliminate, not just, take Luka and Kyrie out of the games, but stifle them, challenge them a little bit, limit them offensively. And it just hasn't happened. You have those two guys, Luka and Kyrie, who cannot defend at all. So you look at it on the other side now, and with Boston, we know around the perimeter and defensively, one, what the whole team is capable of, but especially Drew Holiday, a champion already, Derek White, who has been awesome, Jaylen Brown, obviously, and that takes nothing away from the other guys like Tatum and so on in their ability defensively, but especially up against those guys that they're going to be matched up with. I just think that Luka, if he can even stay healthy, because we've got this top player curse going on for teams against the Boston Celtics, provided that he is out there, I still expect him to have some big games and put up some numbers, but I think he's going to have an awfully hard time doing it. And I don't think Kyrie is going to have nearly as much offensive success as he's had in this series against Minnesota. Maybe that'll make him more of a facilitator, less of a scorer. That's possible. But, let's not ignore that, Boston matched up with Dallas twice in the regular season, won them both by double digits, one of them in an absolute blowout. So these teams are a little bit different, obviously, now than they were then, but Celtics are still unequivocally the better team. There's a reason that the look-ahead line or the current lines are what they are right now. Boston should be favored, is favored, should win. Anything less than that's a disappointment, and then some.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting series to handicap, because I trust the Dallas top 2, Kyrie and Luka, at the end of a close game more than I do Tatum and Brown. But if you're just drafting players playground style, after the top 4, so the 2 of each team, I mean, the next 3 guys, but probably in some order, are all Celtics: Holiday, Porzingis, and Derek White. So you're
Right.
talking about a Celtics team that probably does have 5 of the top 7 players. Let me ask it this way: if Dallas does win the series and Boston whatever, loses in six, however they lose. Is somebody going to pay the price? Is it Missoula? I wouldn't think they'd break up Tatum and Brown, but what's the reaction and what would the fans be calling for if this is not a Boston title here in a couple weeks?
Well, fans would be calling for Missoula because it's always the coach's fault. I
Sure.
mean, even in spite of their success right now, there are a lot of fans that I hear from in my Twitter mentions on a daily basis that just absolutely hate Joe Missoula. They think he is a terrible head coach. And, it doesn't matter if the team is, number one in the league offensively and number two defensively and all the 12-2 and success that they've had. It doesn't matter. He sucks. That is the outlook from a lot of fans who are unwilling to give him credit for any of this. And it's so wild to me. So he would be the guy in terms of who the fans would be calling for. That being said, I don't think you'd really see any changes. Joe Missoula wouldn't go anywhere without a doubt. Brad Stevens' ownership, the players, they believe in him. And he signed a new contract recently. He is not going anywhere. And as far as the breaking up Jalen and Jason thing, I mean, it depends how they lose, I guess. But is there any evidence throughout this entire season or postseason that you could look at and say these two can't play together? These two can't coexist. These two, if they lose, one of them is the reason why. I don't see it. That was the conversation for a long time from a lot of people in national media, even some locally here. But looking forward with what we've seen so far, where the it's such a stupid award, but the East Finals MVP, it goes to Jaylen Brown in a 5-4 vote, and the other 4 goes to Jason Tatum. Like, both of these guys are top 15 players in the NBA. I know that Brown didn't get that technical all NBA, first, second, or third team recognition, but these are 2 top 15 players in the league, and they would be crazy to break them up. It's hard to really find any significant decisions that they even could make, because most have already been determined, right? Like, you just gave Drew Holiday a new contract. Kristaps Porzingis got a new contract. Derek White is due for a massive payday, and ownership would be crazy to not pay it, because it's not like, with the way the NBA luxury tax works and all of the salary cap, everything, like, you can't just, like, even if they wanted to, and they don't. Absolutely, they do not. But even if they wanted to let Derek White walk away, it's not like you can then take that money and reallocate it somewhere else. It doesn't work that way. You're literally just letting him walk out the door, and you're down a player. You keep him, you give him a new contract, and you're paying that much more in luxury tax penalties, but, like, that's not your problem. That's not my problem. That's not the fans' problem. That's the ownership's wallet. And, so long as Wyc Grousbeck and company are willing to pay those penalties to have a consistent contending team, which they've had for a few years now, and, would really like to open a window in an NBA that increasingly has a just a ridiculous amount of parity, which is so great for the league, then I don't think you make a move. I mean, how do you blow up a team that is routinely in either the conference finals or the NBA finals?
Switching gears, and I agree with you. Switching gears here to football. The Patriots, is this just a year where they take their lumps? Over under 4.5. Where are you at with the win total, and who do you think plays quarterback week 4? I'll put it at week 4 because I get the
Sure.
sense that it's going to be Brissett week 1, although I wouldn't count out May. So where are you out here in New England?
So on my show, The Gambler, as you mentioned, when the schedule came out, the big NFL schedule release day that everyone makes, it's so stupid, but everyone makes such a big deal out of it. So we did what I, classify as the lazy sports radio talk show thing of looking at the Patriots schedule and going game by game and how many are they going to win. And me and the guys on the show, we all agreed that this is, and I don't think this is with this, like, ridiculous amount of hometown bias. We just looked at the schedule and said, this is capable of being, and even borderline should be, a 6 or 7 win team. So that being said, I mean, I'd have a little resistance to pull the trigger on over 5.5 wins, where I've seen that at plus money in some places, but laying the juice on 4.5, I'm good with. I think this is a team that should win at least 5 games. I mean, they brought back, many of their more important players last year, and don't get me wrong, I recognize this is a team that is talent deficient. They are missing a lot of very important skill players on both sides of the football that you were hoping they would address all the more so in this offseason that they really didn't to the degree that people would like. But I just think there are some winnable games on that schedule. And if, the quarterback situation, like I give that win prediction independent of the quarterback, because I think that Jacoby Brissett is a more than capable backup quarterback. Like he and without a doubt, like top 30 starting quarterback in the NFL. I wouldn't say that, which is why he's in the position that he's in, but he's absolutely a guy that can get you some wins. We've seen it throughout his career as a journeyman, and even, going way back to the beginning in his time, obviously in New England, although there were some injuries in there. As far as Drake Maye goes, I agree with you. I mean, the word on the street, the vibe out of camp, all of that is that it's Jacoby Brissett's, I don't want to say job to lose, but they seem to be pretty hell-bent on the idea of not rushing Drake Maye along and, giving him some time to be behind the scenes, hold a clipboard, observe, just be part of practices, not really throw him into the fire the way they did Mac Jones, which, by the way, I don't think that was a bad decision. I think that was the right decision. It's like you would have rather had Cam Newton start that season than Mac Jones. I mean, you'd be crazy. And so looking at it now, though, I think part of it is, what does this look like in camp and preseason games, right? Like, I think it really took Mac Jones significantly outplaying Cam Newton to get that starting job. I think, Bill, in his heart of hearts, probably wanted to go with Cam, and Mac forced his hand. Now with Gerard Mayo as head coach, I think it's kind of the same mentality. I think they would really, you ask them today, Jacoby Brissett's our guy. They would really like Jacoby Brissett to be the starting quarterback for this team. And if at some point along the way he is bad or underwhelming, you feel like you got to give the rookie a look by, mid-season or even a little bit later, then so be it. But as far as Drake Maye, being there for week 1 or even as soon as week 4, as you said, I think he's really got to impress in camp and in these preseason games, to where he's not only like neck and neck with Brissett. I think he's got to outplay him. I think it has to be a clear disparity in play, to where which one of these guys, because look, this is a 17 game season, right? Like, which one of these guys gives us the better chance to win? And if there's one thing that the Kraft family cares about, it is ditching themselves of the embarrassment of all of these, either playoff-less seasons or playoff failures that have happened since the departure of Tom Brady. They want to be back on the map. They want to get out of the shadows of irrelevancy, and that's where they are right now. So I think that they're going to give Maye as long and hard a look as they possibly can, but right now Brissett's the guy.
Yeah, I think there's two things at play, and they're sort of conflicting. One is, if you read the reports, if you believe the reports, it's not like they've just picked Maye out of default. Hey, I guess we'll take him. It sounds like Minnesota, some of these other teams offered some monster packages to trade up and get Maye, and they passed on him. And if you're going to pass on those packages, that means you're really high on Maye, like really, really high on him. And if you're that high on him, you're probably going to play him sooner than later. But what goes contrary to that, I mean, look, I'm not an expert on the offensive line play, but it sounds like they're really bad on the offensive line, and there's going to be an issue protecting them where, hey, if we like this kid that much, we want to send him out there. Not a lot of weapons at receivers, and maybe he's going to get killed with these two offensive tackles if they're not any good. So kind of competing impulses there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, most important thing at the end of the day is, how do we win football games, and what is going to best set us up for long-term and short-term success. And if they feel like that, rushing Drake Maye out there is going to set him back in some sort of a way, obviously they won't do it. But if they think, hey, like, this kid just looks ready and he's got a lot of poise, and this is the guy that we like and we drafted and we believe in, like you said, rejected all of those packages for, because we feel like he is a transcendent, potentially generational player, then how do you fight the urge to get him out there on the field? I mean, I'm not in NFL front offices or having to make these these tough decisions or anything like that. There's just, the concern is, even beyond the offensive line, he just has so little to work with. Like, the offensive line is, that comes down to protection, and that's important. That's, ask Andrew Luck how important that is. But he also has no one to pass the ball to. I mean, nobody. Like, I thought for sure by now we would have been talking about some sort of a Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel or T. Higgins or the who's the dude in Denver whose name is skipping my mind right now. Like I would have figured there'd be some guy in there who would be a one. And there just isn't. I can't even believe that Juju Smith-Schuster is still on the roster. I mean, whose spot is he taking up? Just get rid of the guy. You're looking at one of your top rookie wide receiver draft picks to emerge and I don't know, outplay Kendrick Bourne and Tyquan Thornton and whoever. Like Devontae Parker's gone, not that he was ever impressive. So yeah, Ramondre Stevenson, who looked run down half of last year. Now maybe Antonio Gibson can come in and either spell him a little bit or be sort of the closest thing they've had to a James White since James White was here. That's what you think they signed him for anyway. But that offensive side of the ball, it's a concern. And it was the entire time that Mac Jones was here. Feels like it's only gotten worse. And so yeah, it's sort of an uphill battle for Drake Maye.
Last one before we get you out of here. Any baseball thought in general? Doesn't have to be Red Sox. Any future award? Braves in some trouble here with all the injuries. Take it whatever direction you want to go in terms of baseball.
Yeah, I guess in the spirit of keeping it Boston based, I'll go with the Red Sox. I think it's a travesty this team refused to spend on them in the offseason, especially with all of the injuries that they are dealing with, be it in the lineup or in the pitching staff, and the fact that they're still right there in the middle of the AL East and in position to potentially be a playoff team. I mean, I didn't have a futures bet on this team because I just felt like the win total was pretty efficient. I bet the over, I want to say it was 79.5, 78.5 last year. And due to their late season collapse, I got hooked, which was just so aggravating. And then seeing it, this year it was like, I think it opened at maybe 80.5 and dropped to 78.5. And it just feels about right. I couldn't understand the people that were out there, putting huge plus money odds bets on this team finishing with like the worst record in all of baseball. It's like, no, I mean, don't get me wrong, like they're going to be perfectly mediocre, but they're not going to be bad. They're not going to be good. They're just going to be in the middle of the pack. And given all the injuries, it feels like they've exceeded expectations to this point in time. What they do going forward and how they operate around the trade deadline is going to be really interesting. For me, I don't know about you. I mean, obviously we're both total degenerates and bet every season, every sport, all that stuff. I mean, I'm betting baseball heavy right now and having a lot more success on money line plays or on very rarely I guess the run line, and then obviously totals. But it's like props are kicking my ass right now, especially strikeout props. Or I've started to, I was playing for a while for a couple weeks with total base props, and now I'm starting to sprinkle some money at RBI props.
There's
And
so much
I
to
I
dig
don't
into.
I just feel like I'm, yeah, like first fives don't even get the kind of a attention from me that they probably should, because that's especially when you don't trust the bullpens, that's a much more efficient market. But the like baseball will bankrupt you if you're not if you're not careful. I just don't think there's a tougher sport to bet in when it comes down to all of the variance that's involved. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I would say if you're struggling to, I would give this advice to anyone struggling and you're betting a lot of stuff. And like you said, you're betting bases, you're betting money lines, and you have this huge menu. Just focus on one thing. Hey, I'm just going to focus on strikeouts. And even if you don't bet like pitcher strikeouts, I'm just going to focus on pitcher strikeouts. That's going to be my thing. Even if I don't bet for a week and I just make pretend bets and study it, you're really going to hone in on, hey, this team strikes out a lot, this pitcher, his usage, that kind of thing, where otherwise you're spreading yourself too thin, because you could look at one game for 2 hours with total bases. Will this guy homer? Will this, runs in our bit? There's just so many different things within one game that you end up just spreading yourself too thin, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's I mean, there's credit the books. There's an incredible menu,
Yeah.
obviously, of things that are available to you, and they're different from book to book as well. And you get the
Outs
booth.
recorded, things like that. I mean, there's
Yeah,
just so much. There's something, it's insane.
yeah. Or, I mean, the amount of people that play like over under on walks.
Yeah.
Like there's just everything that is out there for you. Yeah, I mean, outs recorded, I feel like I don't know how new that is as a bet,
Pretty new.
because we here in Massachusetts, like gambling has only been legal for just over a year at this point in time. But I feel like last year during the regular season, it was never like I never even saw it. Like nobody was ever posting about that. And then the playoffs got here, and all of a sudden people are leaning into the outs recorded bets. And then throughout this year, it's been a real big thing as well.
Adam, appreciate a few minutes here. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, first of all, like, can you tell I haven't talked to anybody other than you today with how long-winded these answers are? You can get me on Twitter at Adam M Kaufman. The show, The Gambler with Adam Kaufman, that is the full name, just not just my ego. Is 10 to midnight Eastern time. We stream on the iHeartMedia website, WRKO. We put all the shows out in podcast forms, so subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So we mix it up, and occasionally for people that are anyone watching and sees the backdrop behind you, occasionally I'll pop onto VSiN there too. So we have a good time.
Adam, this was fun, man. Hopefully we'll catch up here down the road.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
All right, that will do it. Thank you to Adam Kaufman. We'll be back end of the week. Don't forget, rate, review, subscribe. See you guys then.